Recording in progress.
Good afternoon and welcome to the February 28th, 2024 City Council Work Session and Urban Renewal Agency meeting. Thank you for joining us in this virtual meeting format. For work sessions like this one, where there is no opportunity for public comment, those wishing to access the meeting can do so by watching the live stream available on our website, the broadcast on Comcast Channel 21, or by calling into one of the phone numbers listed for this meeting on the public webcast and meeting materials webpage. And thank you all for joining us. And with that, I now open the February 28th, 2024 meeting of the Urban Renewal Agency. And I will turn it over to the city manager for introduction.
Thank you, Mayor. We have sort of one topic with three kind of parts. So today we're starting off talking about the 1059 Willamette site, and Amanda D'Souza is here joining us. And I think, Amanda, you're going to walk through all three of these different meeting topics. Okay, yep, so it is correct. All you now. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, good afternoon. I'm Amanda D'Souza, Development Programs Manager, and I'm here with Dylan Huber-Heidorn to talk about 1059 Willamette. As the city manager mentioned, this topic is split into three agenda item summaries, and that's because you have three different decisions to consider today. We'll do a single presentation on all three items and then talk through the decision points. First, I'll do a quick recap of the key project milestones. The building has been vacant since 2013, when Lane Community College moved to their new downtown campus. In 2019, we began exploring the possibility of using the site to pilot a mixed income housing project, and that year LCC approved sale of the property to the city. We acquired the property in 2020 using federal community development block grant dollars, and a few months later, council approved the use of a request for proposals process for disposition of the site. The RFP outlined several criteria for the project and identified the availability of $1.1 million for STCs and permits. The RFP was released at the end of 2020, and we received one response, which you selected in June 2021. Later that year, you approved deal points for the proposed project, and then in May of last year, you approved revisions to those deal points, and we subsequently executed the Disposition and Development Agreement, or DDA. Since the development agreement was signed last year, we've been working with the team to move the project forward. Due diligence was completed, and the federal environmental review steps are in progress. The development team has been refining their project, entering into their architectural phase, completing schematics, and working on their financing plan. You can see the time and effort they've invested to move this project forward within the details of their MUPD application. Today's discussion is focused on three elements that are needed for the project to move forward. The first is a possible revision to the approved DDA terms, which also includes the second item, a request for additional financial assistance. Third, you'll consider the request for a MUPD. Before I dig into the proposed revisions to the DDA terms, I'll recap the project as it's currently approved. The project you've approved includes 129 units. 66 of those would be income qualified to 80% of area median income, and 63 would be market rate. The income qualified units would remain affordable for 35 years, which is longer than the minimum of 20 years that we required. They would offer resident services from Cornerstone Community Housing. 10 units will be designated for Hope and Safety Alliance. There's an active ground floor with incubator retail space and local art. There's pet amenities. And then the $1.1 million has been approved for STCs and permits. There are three proposed revisions to the DDA terms you're considering today. The first is a proposed increase to the number of units. The team requests an increase of 4 units from 129 to 133. Of those 4 units, 2 would be income qualified and 2 would be market rate, so they will still be meeting the mixed income project requirements. The next proposed revision is for additional financial assistance. As you know, $1.1 million has already been approved and will be used for SDCs and permits. That $1.1 million consists of downtown urban renewal funds and the MUPD moderate income housing fee generated from the Gordon Lofts project. To provide some context for the request, I'll briefly touch on the project costs. Since the team's initial proposal in 2021, construction costs, interest rates, and operating expenses have increased significantly. For example, the interest rate in early 2021 was 3.65%, and by October 2023, it was at 8%. In addition, estimated hard construction costs have risen by 24% in the same period. The team has been working to offset these impacts through the inclusion of additional units, refinement of their design, and revising their financing strategy to include an opportunity zone investment. However, a gap remains, and the team has requested an additional investment of $740,000 of downtown urban renewal funds for project-related costs, such as abatement and demolition. The proposed deal point would increase the total city and agency financial assistance to $1.84 million. This is in addition to providing the land at no cost, which is standard for our land bank program, and potentially foregoing property tax revenue through the MUPD you're considering today. The inclusion of this revised term will depend on the agency board taking action to approve the use of these funds, which is why there's a separate item for you to consider that request. The final proposed revision to the DDA terms is related to the closing date. The current approved term states that closing will occur within 17 months of execution of the DDA, which is October 31st, of this year. As of today, and despite the funding gap, it is possible we'll be ready to close and they'll be ready to start construction by that date. We're optimistic we'll get there. However, the remaining federally required environmental review steps are subject to actions outside of city or developer control. The proposed change is to provide a small cushion should these steps take longer than anticipated and allow us to extend closing by 3 months to no later than February 1st, 2025. Those are the 3 proposed revisions for your consideration. I'll now hand it off to Dylan to walk through the 1059 Willamette MUPD application.
Thanks, Amanda. The developer has applied for a MUPD, or multi-unit property tax exemption, for this project. Before submitting a MUPD application, the applicant must meet with the neighborhood that will host their project. The applicant is also required to meet with the neighborhood association after a MUPD approval. Once we receive the MUPD application, we publish a notice of a 30-day comment period. This occurred last fall with no testimony submitted. We send the project's financial information to a third-party consultant who reviews the details and provides us with independent conclusions about whether or not the project needs a MUPD. And then the application is reviewed by the technical and neighborhood representatives who sit on the MUPD review panel. In December, the MUPD review panel voted 6-0 to recommend approval of a 10-year exemption for this project. The details of their conclusions are included in your packet. To qualify for MUPD, a project must meet a series of public benefit criteria. I will briefly summarize how those criteria apply to this development. The MUPD program requirements and the property zoning each have no minimum density requirement that applies to this project. The transit-oriented development overlay that impacts the site requires a floor area ratio of 2.0 for new development. This project has a floor area ratio of 5.2, and the 133 units add up to a residential unit density of 316 units per acre. The applicant provided a local economic impact plan, which estimates that 63% of the dollar volume spent on professional services and construction contracts will go to firms that are based here in Lane County, which surpasses the 50% target for the MUPD program. They've also committed to meet requirements such as engaging with minority, women, and emerging small business firms about contracting opportunities, and promised compliance with wage, tax, and licensing laws. MUPD applicants must either pay a moderate income housing contribution fee or provide 30% of their units at rents affordable to moderate income households, defined as making 100% of the area median income. The developer has chosen the moderate income units option. For the purposes of MUPD, they would need to maintain their moderate income rents for the duration of the 10-year exemption. But as discussed, they're actually providing a much higher affordability threshold, 51% of units at rents affordable to 80% AMI residents, and they'll maintain those affordable rents for 35 years, significantly longer than the 10-year MUPD period. A project must select a pathway to demonstrate improved energy efficiency in order to meet the green building features requirements. This project chose the building permit services pathway, which requires the developer to provide an engineered energy model along with their building permits. That model must show energy efficiency at least 10% better than baseline energy codes. There are also requirements related to historic and existing housing sensitivity. 1059 Willamette is across the street from the McDonald Theater, a designated historic locale. A review by planning staff concluded the theater would not be adversely impacted, and the development team drew inspiration from the historic Montgomery Ward building that once stood on the site when they were designing the Willamette Street facade. Additionally, the developer is required to coordinate with the State Historic Preservation Office to mitigate impacts to nearby historic buildings. The Preservation Office approved demolition of the existing building and must approve the new building design in order for the project to move forward. The next set of MUPD criteria relate to project design and compatibility. A full review letter from the urban design staff in planning division is included in your packet. There are 4 major categories of criteria here, including the scale, form, and quality of the building, the mixture of project elements, the relationship to the street and surrounding uses, and parking and circulation. The development team successfully knits the building into the neighborhood through design decisions and material selections, engages with the street environment on both Willamette and 11th, and conceals parking away from pedestrian spaces. The facades on the 2 streets are distinctly different, and the history of the site is reflected in brick on Willamette Street, and more contemporary metal panel and other materials bring a different character on 11th. Urban design staff provided wholehearted support for the quality of the project. The proposed building designs were assessed in detail by urban design staff as well as the MUPD review panel, and both concluded that the project meets the design and compatibility criteria. The quality of the architecture and the exterior materials figured into those conclusions, as did the building's relationship with the streets and the community around it. The left side of this slide shows the overall site plan for the project. The developer proposes flexible commercial spaces, including publicly accessible gallery space that they'll make available below market rents, facing both Willamette Street and 11th Avenue through large storefront windows. The parking area, which is accessed from the alley, takes up a lot of the first floor. There's also a small courtyard in the interior corner of the building for dog owners to give their pet a quick trip outside. The 5 stories of residences above will follow a pattern like what you see on the right. The final criteria relate to whether or not the project needs the benefit of a MUPD to be built. Our independent financial consultant for this application was Pacific Northwest Economics. Their review of the project's financial information is in your packet. Their conclusion was that the project would not be financially viable without a MUPD, meaning it likely could not be built. This graph shows the projected property tax revenue for the development over a 20-year period. As long as the property remains in public ownership, it generates no tax revenue. Once it's privately owned, the value of the land will generate about $27,500 in the first year. If the project is awarded a MUPD, it will exempt a total of about $3.3 million in property taxes on the improvements on the property over the 10-year MUPD period. In year 11, when the exemption ends, it's estimated the $34 million project will generate about $427,000 in property tax per year, and by year 20, property taxes will rise to an estimated $557,000. I'll hand things back to Amanda.
Thanks, Dylan. I'll finish up the presentation with some logistics about today's meeting. You can discuss the project as a whole. When it comes time to take action, it needs to be considered in a specific order. I'll start with the 3rd item. The MUPD application is for a project that has more units than you've currently approved. If you wanted to approve the MUPD, you'd first need to revise the DDA terms to allow for the additional units. Next, in addition to the unit increase, one of the proposed revisions to the DDA terms is the financial assistance. However, before council can revise the terms to include financial assistance, the agency board needs to approve the use of the funds. So that action would need to happen first, which is why you're currently gavelled in as the agency board. The city manager and agency director recommend approval of all 3, the financial assistance, the revised DDA terms, and the MUPD. With that, we're happy to answer any questions you may have about any of these items. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I am really eager to see this project move forward, so I'm interested in the conversation among the council. And Greg already has his hand up, so Greg and then Randy.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Thanks, Amanda. My question is for you, and it's more about the construction of the project and more specifically, what are the challenges? And I've heard this over time that there are going to be significant challenges around the demolition of the existing building, and how much that is going to cost and how it's going to affect surrounding buildings to the project site. Can you talk a little bit more about that, and can you tease out what those demolition costs are?
Yeah, so a demolition of buildings in downtown is one of the big reasons why building downtown is more expensive. We did have a contractor come in around 2019 to give an estimate of what demolition costs would be. They updated it a couple years ago. I believe it's anywhere between 900,000 and 1.1 million to do that. It depends on the asbestos abatement. It's hard to tell exactly what the asbestos looks like in the building. But they've taken into account the complications of demoing downtown, the restricted project site and size. So that's all been taken into account into that cost.
Didn't we get a cost on the asbestos abatement vis-a-vis when Lane Community College owned the building? Didn't they have that? Didn't they have an estimate done about what was going to be needed to abate the asbestos that was in the building originally?
Yeah, so the 2019 estimate was it could be anywhere between 200 and 400,000 just for the abatement. There were some places where they're just not having access to the space there, it could range. And so that was the cost estimate in 2019 based on what you could see from just a walk around the building.
Okay, do we get any kind of any updated estimates or calculations figured into these figures that you just gave us?
They have the most recent estimates we have. The updated estimate we have is from 2021. And so that's what the numbers that the team has been factoring into their project costs. So that's included in the total project cost that they've provided.
But has not calculated for any kind of inflationary increase up to date, right?
Off the top of my head, I assume that they have done that, but I've not explicitly asked them if they've updated their estimates for those.
Well, getting that information will help me in terms of, making a decision on how I vote to move forward. So I would appreciate getting some of that information back so that we know exactly what the costs are going to be and what the district is going to have to outlay to make this project go. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Randy and then Emily.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Amanda, for the presentation, and Dylan. As always, it's informative. I've been excited about this project from the beginning. It's doing exactly what we keep saying we need to be doing in our downtown. I'm just sorry that the costs have spiraled up so much between inflation, loan rates, and construction costs. But I still think it's a very important piece to our downtown, and I hope that we're able to proceed with this. I'm excited about the developer that's working on this. He has a great reputation. And I just think our city needs this. My question, like Councilor Evans, was also on the demo. What can we do as a city to help minimize the impact on the surrounding uses of our downtown?
I'm not totally sure. I've never been involved with a demolition yet. I think we'll work with the owner, with the team to make sure the impacts are minimal. I know LTD is a big party in that, and so we'll make sure that there's open communication with LTD about coordinating what demo looks like. So we'll play a role in that. If the financial assistance is approved, our assumption is that it would be used to help support the demo costs.
I mean, to me, it's not a showstopper unless it would just completely, upend things, which I don't see it doing that. But I hope that we take every opportunity we can to work with the developer to help set this up for success. I mean, this is other projects will be watching this one very closely. I know it's much harder to develop when you have close quarters between existing buildings. I know there's concerns of dust and, of course, substances that may or may not be, or probably are in this structure. So, I really think how we carry this forward, how we move forward with this, is going to be very, very important to future development in our downtown core. Thank you.
Hey, thank you. Emily and then Mike.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Great synopsis. I was council liaison for this project and worked on the RFP from the beginning. I'm really excited about this project, and it's been frustrating to wait so long. It's definitely a site of blight. We need more housing downtown so desperately. And the construction costs and demolition costs for anything downtown have gone up. So it's unfortunate we had to wait, but in this present day, we can't really complain. I mean, we can complain, but we can't do anything about the additional cost. I think it's warranted to get the urban renewal money and the MUPD, although in the past I have been opposed to those things. But I think this is a really great project, and I'm especially interested in the mixed of income levels. I would love to see more of that all over, because I think it will enable communication between different groups, and communication is how we get things done. So asbestos and room to demolition is going to be in a lot of places downtown, and yet we've made that a priority. So yes, we need to make it as easy on surrounding properties and as safe as possible, and I believe we will do that. I think the developers and staff have put a lot of conscientious time into this project, and I'm anxious to see it move forward today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike, and then Matt.
Thank you, Mayor. Great presentation. Amanda, could you remind me what the cost to the district was in acquiring the property in the first place?
So the district did not acquire property. The city
The
acquired
city.
it using federal community development block grant funds, and we paid $500,000 for the property.
Okay, so if I'm hearing you properly, it's 1.8 is the ask up front. It's 3.2, whatever it was in the foregone MUPD taxes, and $500,000 up front to buy it. So the city's investment is $5.5 million, something like that.
Yes, I mean the exemption amount that assumes the building will get built, and so if doesn't get a MUPD and the project doesn't get built, then there is no.
Sure, yeah.
But yeah,
I've
so
used that argument once or twice.
Yeah, it's
Mike, there's a colleague or two who hates it when I do it, and he's next to me on the screen. But yeah, I've used that argument several times myself. Without it, it won't get done. Yeah. Can you remind me again how tall the building is once complete?
I believe 6 stories. Dylan, can you remind me? Is it 6 stories? I should remember this off the top of my head.
It is 6 stories. I'm not sure the
Feet?
footage. I can find that for you.
I'd be good to know. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, Matt, and then Alan.
Thank you, Mayor, Amanda, and Dylan. Thank you. I cannot underscore, express, bold, and italicize my enthusiasm for this mixed use, affordable housing and market rate housing approach. I applaud the continued partnership with the Hope and Safety Alliance, formerly Women's Space. I applaud the laudable efforts to have pet accommodations. It's my understanding, a disability justice component as well that I'm keenly interested in amplifying. And to my knowledge, this may be among the most robust examples of building up, not out, combining mixed use, mixed economy, both affordable housing and market rate housing, and partnering with our service providers in not just in our region, but in the entire state. So when it comes time, Mayor, I will enthusiastically recommend the approval of the use of the 740,000. My question is it enough? If it's a 2021 study and there are shipping challenges and costs keep going up, would it be in this council's interest to bring that up to $1 million? Is my question, Amanda.
Sorry. That is the ask that the development team has put out there based on their pro forma that they've put together. I mean, they're experts in this. They've delivered on projects similar to this before, and so they're confident with this additional 740 and their additional work on their financing plan that this is going to be enough to get the project going.
Okay. Well, I cannot wait to see the cranes in the air. I just wish it would have happened sooner, but I also understand the complications, and it will be a small bump in the road for the surrounding businesses. But as someone who frequents one of those businesses and shops for records at Epic Seconds all the time, the amount of activity that's happening in and around that building is questionable in regards to public safety and environmental concerns. I cannot wait to not only see the cranes in the air, but to see the 130 plus homes right on a transit line, right in the heart of our downtown. So thank you. And to colleagues, I look forward to your support to get it done.
Great, thank you. Alan.
Thank you. I too am very excited about this project. It has so many good aspects that everybody else has already enumerated, so I want to enumerate them. But the need for housing and the need for housing downtown is particularly acute. I agree with Emily, this is a blighted area. And the more eyes we have on the street, the more eyes we have in the place, more people, the safer it's going to be. So I think this will be an enhancement and to that area. The cost increase is very understandable. This project wouldn't be immune from everything else that's gone up in terms of construction. The particular part of this project that I like is the affordable housing aspect of it, which is greater than 50% of the units. That's different than almost all other MUPDs that have come before us. And again, we only get affordable housing that we subsidize. We have got zero market-based affordable housing units. As far as I keep asking if somebody could tell me where they're from, where they are, but I can't. Maybe Mike, you can let me know the exception that proves the rule. But the exception for me on MUPD is the affordable housing aspect of it. So the fact that this project is a majority affordable housing makes me okay with the MUPD, because I think that, again, we only get affordable housing if we subsidize it, and this is an appropriate subsidy. So I finally get to vote for a MUPD. Yay, yay, yes, hey me. So I'm enthusiastic about this project.
Well, that makes this a banner day, Alan. Thank you. All right, are there any other questions or comments about this? Oh, yes, Dylan, clarification. Oh, and it looks like Randy. So Dylan, I'll let you go first, and then maybe that'll answer Randy's question.
Quick response to Councilor Clark's question. The most specific number I can give you right this minute about the height is less than 70 feet in a zone that allows up to 150.
Okay, thank you. And then Amanda, did you have a clarification as well?
Yes, we have confirmed with the development team that they have accounted for escalation in their pro forma.
Randy, another comment?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I forgot in the first round. I wanted to ask about prevailing wage on the project.
Yes, as of now, their pro forma assumes that the project will not be prevailed. The 1.1 million for SDCs and permits, that is exempt from being considered funds of a public agency. And then the request for 740 is assumed that that is less than that threshold. So they are assuming it won't be prevailed.
So even if we give a MUPKI to this, it still wouldn't trigger prevailing wage under state
Correct.
requirements.
Yep. The MUPTI does not count towards that.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
All right, Matt?
Sounds like we should be pinning that for a future potential work session, Councilor Groves. But I would encourage colleagues not to let that pause the progress here. But I hear Councilor Groves real loud and clear, and I would stand in solidarity and support to reform that in the future.
Okay, thank you. And with that, Matt, I think you're on deck now to put a motion forward.
Thank you, Mayor. Move to approve the use of $740,000 of downtown urban renewal tax increment funds to support the 1059 Willamette project.
Second.
Okay, if there are no other further questions, all in favor, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and that we have that unanimously. That is terrific. Thank you very much. And with that vote, I now close this meeting of the Urban Renewal Agency and call to order the February 28th, 2024 City Council work session. And that puts us in a place for the second motion. Matt, if you want to put that out.
Thank you, Mayor. Move to approve the revised terms in attachment A and to authorize the city manager to amend the development agreement consistent with the revised terms included in attachment A.
Do I have a second?
I'm sorry, I'm still thinking about prevailing wage. Second.
Okay. All in favor, please raise your hands. Oh, wait, sorry, hold it. Emily has a question.
I'm just wondering how they fit in the extra 4 units. Did it make the building bigger or did it make some of the units smaller? It won't affect my vote. I'm just really curious about that.
Yeah, I believe that they changed a couple of the 2 bedrooms. There are still a couple 2-bedroom units in there, but they split a couple of the 2-bedroom units that were in the original proposal.
Good question. Thank you. All right, now, if that's the last question, all in favor, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That passes unanimously. Thank you. And then a final motion, Matt?
Thank you, Mayor. My final motion in regards to 1059 Willamette redevelopment. I move to adopt a resolution approving a multiple unit property tax exemption for residential property located at 1059 Willamette Street in Eugene, Oregon. Applicant 1059 Willamette Investment LLC.
Second.
Okay, any questions or comments? All in favor, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and that passes unanimously as well. So thank you staff for the work that you did on this and informing us and presenting such a thorough packet. I think we're all really, really eager to see this project move forward. It'll make such a big difference in our downtown, and grateful that we have a really high quality local developer doing the work and thinking about the future of our community. So it's terrific. Thank you all. And with that, I think we can make the transition to our next item on the agenda. And so I will turn that back over to the city manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Your next topic is results of a work session poll and a general discussion of the Eugene City Charter, which I know is an exciting topic for many. And Brooke Freed, Chief of Staff, is going to lead us through that conversation. Has been doing a lot of research with the city attorney to be able to proceed that discussion.
Good afternoon. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Are you able to see that?
Yes.
Great. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I'm Brooke Freed, Chief of Staff in the City Manager's Office. In response to your work session poll, I'll be presenting information regarding the 2002 Charter Review and Amendment process. Today, we'll begin with the Charter generally, then dig into the amendment process that started in 1999 and concluded in 2002. After that, I'll highlight some of the areas within the Charter that have been of interest to councilors, and we will leave plenty of time at the end for questions and discussion. So to start, a little bit about the Charter itself. The Oregon Constitution grants cities the authority to draft and amend their charters and pass local ordinances. Amendments to the Charter can be initiated by council through the referral process or can be initiated by citizen petition. In either case, any proposed amendments must be voted on and approved by the citizens of Eugene. There's no required process for regularly reviewing the Eugene Charter as a whole. The most recent review process, as I mentioned, occurred from 1999 to 2002. Since that time, individual charter amendments occurred in 2005 and 2008. Those were related to the external review of police. 2017 related to collective bargaining, and 2019 city payroll tax. Now we'll go over the review process that occurred between 1999 and 2002. This process occurred in 3 general phases, beginning with an initial charter review commission in 1999, transitioning to a citizen committee on mayor and council compensation, and concluding with a citizen charter review committee. I'll cover this body of work in detail in the next several slides. In 1999, council's strategic goals included an action priority to appoint a charter review commission. In alignment with that priority, council established a subcommittee of 2 councilors to recommend a structure. That recommendation, which council ultimately accepted, was a 15-person committee primarily to review the issue of mayor and council compensation. The commission met 4 times and also held 1 subcommittee meeting to draft the final report, attachment C in your council packet. During the course of its work, the commission reviewed compensation for mayors and councilors in other cities, the number of meetings and hours the mayor and councilor spent on city work, mechanisms used by other cities to set and adjust compensation levels, various possible forms of compensation, and survey results from current and recent councilors. The commission was unable to reach an agreement on a recommendation for putting a measure on the November ballot due to the limited time frame, but did recommend continuing to examine the issue. The commission work ended with their final report, and the council discussion was tabled until September 1999. That moves us into phase 2, the Committee on Compensation. On September 8th, 1999, council passed a motion to place a charter amendment on the May 2000 ballot that called for compensation for the mayor and city council. The motion included the formation of a 7-member committee to draft a viable and equitable charter amendment for council's review and referral. The committee was given a 3-month timeline with work to be completed by February 1st of 2000. The committee met, 9 times within the 3-month period and held 2 public forums. Additionally, each meeting allowed for public comments, email comments were collected, a web page was created, and minutes were kept for all meetings. During the course of its work, the committee reviewed the report of the previous commission, surveyed and interviewed current and former elected officials, and studied data from other Pacific Northwest cities. The committee presented its final report to council on February 9th, 2000, which is attachment D in your council packet. The committee recommended the mayor be paid a stipend of $1,500 per month, the councilors be paid $1,000 per month, and stipends be adjusted annually based on the Portland Consumer Price Index. The council accepted the recommendations and scheduled a public hearing that same month. 2 weeks later, council passed a resolution to refer the amendment to the May 2000 ballot. That May, Eugene voters approved the charter amendment by nearly 1,200 votes. And that brings us to phase 3 of that work, the Charter Review Committee. Following the successful passage of the compensation amendment on May 2000, that summer, council created a 9-member citizen charter review committee to undertake a review of additional items that were identified by council. Topics included the number of wards and elections by ward versus an at-large model, conflicts of interest, the role of the city manager, filling vacancies on the council, eWeb function and membership, and a number of housekeeping items. Recruitment was to begin on September of 2000, and committee work to end with a final report to council by the end of December 2001. The committee met 40 times between January and December of 2001. The meetings allowed for public comments each of the times, and minutes were kept for all of the meetings. And for the first 3 months, the committee met weekly, and as well as creating some subcommittees. Additionally, they held 2 public forums. During the course of its work, the committee encountered several issues that it wished to study further, which the council largely approved upon the committee's request. Additionally, a quarterly report was provided to council in 2001 in which council considered several substantive motions due to the timeliness of the items they were discussing. These were related to the number of wards and city councilors, and the implications were related to the fact that they were undergoing the redistricting process at that time. They also considered an item related to instant runoff voting. The committee presented its final report to the council in January of 2002, and that report was included in your council packet as well. That final report was the end of the committee's work, as these were ad hoc committees with a finite timeline. Subsequently, over the next 6 months, the city council discussed and deliberated on that committee's recommendations at 8 separate work sessions. Ultimately, these charter amendments that you see here, there were 8, were referred by council to the November 2002 ballot. As part of the final deliberations that council had, council also approved a $10,000 amount for public outreach related to the proposed charter amendments and $20,000 for the voters pamphlet. At that November election, the Eugene voters approved 7 of the 8 amendments, so all but the city attorney amendments, wrapping up this rather significant body of work. So in summary, the work that occurred between April 1999 and July 2002 led to the passage of 8 charter amendments. I'll note that in your work session poll for today, you had included a request for information regarding the staffing requirements and costs of this process, which are a little bit difficult to estimate at this time. So we will say in general, the committees across this period held 53 committee meetings and 4 public forums, and all of this was staffed out of the city manager's office. Additionally, there was some substantial legal support provided by the city attorney's office. There were also additional costs such as the $10,000 for public outreach and those costs related to the voters pamphlets. Now, with that background, we're going to shift to the current charter and some of the areas you may have interest in discussing further. Because this is your first work session on the topic, we wanted to provide you with a list of areas within the charter that 1 or more councilors or the city manager have expressed interest in potentially reviewing. To be clear, this is not a proposed scope or a definitive list, and it's not in any particular order. The areas that you raised included mayor and council compensation levels, compensation for eWeb board members who are not currently compensated within the existing charter, the timing of the mayoral election, particularly as it aligns with councillor elections for wards 1, 2, 7, and 8, the mayor and councillor vacancy process, which would include recall, and the process for handling interim appointments. The department head residency requirement that's currently in the charter. And finally, a general review of language throughout the charter, such as the level of detail, an equity review, including the potential removal of any antiquated language. And that concludes my overview. So I'll turn it back to you, Mayor, for questions and discussion.
Okay, thank you so much. I just, that was a very succinct presentation, and it was a massive council packet that we all received. 616 pages was pretty impressive. But I will just say that even though I obviously did not read every word of that, it was very interesting to see the conversations reflected in the minutes that were in that packet of the council before us. The council at that time was grappling with some of the same issues around equity, and is it too difficult for too many people in our community to run for office because of the lack of compensation? And now I guess we look at whether there's a question of whether we increase that compensation in some way and what that would actually look like. So I really appreciate all the effort that went into providing us with that historical record, because it was very interesting. And the other thing that I thought was very interesting was that councilors had gone through a period, I guess, under Mayor Tory, in which they had kept track of their hours, which also was a kind of an interesting exercise to really create some sort of real data as close as they could get. So anyway, thank you for that preparation. I'm really interested to hear the questions that councilors have, and I will turn it over to Matt.
Thanks, Mayor. I have more of a presentation, or a more gratitude for the presentation and the historical observations that you shared, Brooke. I am interested in presenting a motion, Mayor, that would direct the manager to return to council with a laser-focused recommendation around a review of the council mayor compensation to be considered at a future work session implemented in 2025 with citizen input. And if you would like me to wait to make that motion, I'm happy to do so. But if that motion sparks conversation, I'm open to that as well. But from an equity point of view, and to encourage more persons to get involved, and frankly, to adjust the pay accordingly, get it closer to the median income rather than essentially the stipend that it is now, is healthy for democracy. And so, I look, Mayor, to your guidance, and colleagues, I look to your input, your valued input and support, if we were to have a laser focused lens from an equity standpoint, bringing community together to have a more robust conversation about something that has not been adjusted for almost a generation.
Yeah, so I would like you to hold on making that motion and let us have a little conversation first, in case that informs how you frame that motion. So let's have a conversation first. And I see Jennifer with her hand up.
Thanks, Mayor. So thanks first for this presentation, and thank you, Brooke, for doing all of that historic research, and also just the amount of work folks did back in 99 to 2002 is very impressive, and anyone who's still around, very appreciative of the work that they did. It must have been a lot. So I think the areas of interest that you picked were all interesting. I don't know that I have ideas of what should be changed or shouldn't be changed, but I think they are all worth taking a look at. So thank you. I can concur with those. I have no problem having work sessions about them, including the one Matt's talking about. I do think if we're going to talk about compensation, we should be really clear at what is the problem we're trying to solve. Because there may be other things besides financial things that would help folks have the opportunity to serve on council that might make a bigger difference or might make an equal difference. I don't want to assume it's all financial. I think there are other barriers to being able to serve. And I think I could see there being barriers to having the position be a full-time job position as well. There'd be different barriers for that. So I just want us to be very clear about what we're trying to solve and then choose things that solve that problem. But I'm happy to talk about it, I guess. And I would support a motion to that effect.
Okay, thank you. Brooke, did you have a comment on that or clarification?
Yeah, just a brief clarification. The items of interest that I shared were areas in the charter that you as counselors raised. So I just wanted to nuance that a bit. So some of your colleagues might be able to illuminate sort of what specific interests they have within those broad categories. Those are just simply ones that came up over the course of discussions.
Okay, so that's an invitation to all of you to explain if you added one of those items to the list. And Emily and then Alan.
Thank you for the presentation, and I'm happy to explain. I've been very concerned about the overlap of elections since I started. As we know from example, if you're in Ward 3, 4, 5, 6, you can run for other offices such as mayor, where the time is up on those 4 years. And speaking of equity, I really don't think that that's fair that half of council can run for mayor without any danger of losing their seat. But for the other 4 to run for mayor, they must give up their seat. I have never wanted to run for mayor, so I don't think I have a conflict of interest here, but it really, really bothers me. I'm not quite sure what the answer is. I think giving a longer term to the mayor would be reasonable since it's a more complicated job, but then we get off of that 4-year cycle. So I'm really hoping for some help with that one. I think that the compensation really needs to be looked at. My first years, I was on food stamps, and I don't think that's a really good look for someone representing our city. I think it should be the median income. That seems fair to me. As far as whether it's part-time or full-time, my first few years, I worked more than full-time. There's so much to learn, so very much to learn about so many topics, and you need to get in depth. But an advantage of being incumbent is you've done that work. So when the topics come back around, you don't have to go to the very beginning of learning about it. Being a second term and the pandemic, I worked and not meeting as much. I worked less. So was my work less valuable because I had to put in more hours? I don't think so, because I came with that knowledge that I had learned in the previous term. Not many people are willing to run. I'm astounded and really discouraged that most of the races have no competition or one person running against. It's grueling to run in the primary and the general. It does seem kind of weird, but I know it's state to elect someone so far in advance of taking office. So I think this is a really important topic. I'd like to come back to it, and I'd really like some ideas about the conflict of election cycles. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Alan and then Mike.
Yeah, thanks for the history lesson and the 600 pages. I'm glad you didn't print that out. It was interesting to go back and look at what people were talking about then, and also how involved and how much time it took to go through all of that. We cleaned up a lot of stuff, So I'm not really interested in a lengthy, time-consuming, very involved process like we did before. That is not on my agenda. I am, like Jennifer, willing to talk about stuff, but having limited conversations. But I think we do need, and I agree with Jennifer, that we need to be very specific about what problem we're trying to solve with potential changes. I don't want to talk about solutions looking for a problem. I want to talk about problems looking for solutions. And speaking of that, the compensation conversation, I get the equity concern about that, and I understand how that impacts some people's ability to run for office. But I think the timing, as we potentially go out for a revenue ask of the electorate, seems like really, really bad timing to have that conversation and throw that into the mix. I think that will severely negatively impact that conversation. So that would be a conversation I think we should defer until after that conversation is complete. And I didn't have any specific areas of interest in the charter to talk about, other than the ones that were listed, and most of those I didn't have at the top of my agenda either.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. Mike, and then Randy.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with my colleagues, Alan, Jennifer, and most of their comments about the specifics. I would add to that we'd want to be, any conversation about compensation, we'd want to be specific about expectations as well. Historically, as you know, the record indicates, and many people's conversations that I've had, many folks I've had conversations with over the years, prior to Mayor Tory, the mayor's position was expected to be a part-time position. It wasn't full-time until really he got into it, and then mayors have from that point on been really expected by the population to be accessible full-time. And so, you know, council is still kind of what I would say people's expectations are in another land of they want access and the ability to have conversations, but probably realize it's not a full-time gig. So and that people need to have another job outside of that in order to make ends meet. So I think we should be really clear about expectations and duties when we're having a conversation about any potential change to compensation. And I agree with Alan that our timing is not phenomenal for that conversation. I would also want to say that I would hope that any other areas of review would be very limited. I don't want to see us throw the charter wide open to a fairly massive public process of, you know, trying to see what anybody wants to change. I think very specific recommendations would be best. So thank you.
Hey, thank you. Randy.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to my three colleagues who spoke before me. I agree with very much what I'm hearing. And I'm in kind of the same place of, I think we need some very strong sideboards on this discussion so that it doesn't get out of hand. You know, it's an interesting topic. At the same time, what I'm hoping to see out of it is that we are modernizing some of the language, bringing it up to our current standards. But also, if you read through the charter, there are areas that go into almost nauseum in their specificity. And there's other areas that are really at the crux of what we do that are very brief and, you know, almost bullets. So I'd like to try and achieve some kind of a better balance when it comes to that, because I mean, if you were just coming into this and looking at the charter, you would think some of the smaller issues are our most important things we're working on. And, you know, really running the city and providing the policy oversight is really essential to what we do. On the level of compensation, I agree. I don't know that now is really a good time to be bringing this forward, although I certainly do understand the equity piece. But the flip side to that is, does that change who we get applying for office? I mean, it's good if it helps us get low income people that would be very valuable to this process that we work on. But at the same time, will we be attracting people looking for a paycheck? I don't know if that would be the case or not, because it's not, it's difficult to run for office. I guess that's the best words I can use to describe it. And it's not for the faint of heart, especially when you have opponents. So anyway, that's just some of my thought. I would like to really have a plan, though, before we embark on this and know exactly what it is we're trying to accomplish. Thank you.
Hey, thank you. Lindsay.
Thank you. Yeah, super quickly. I agree with pretty much everything everyone has said. The timing, yeah, is definitely a tricky issue. And you know, Jennifer brought up a really good point of are there other barriers that we can lower to attract people into the position? I mean, I think one thing that I have experienced with my very young children is sometimes the need for childcare. And we were able to provide that during one of our long budget retreat sessions. And that was super helpful for me as a parent. And so looking at that and what could we do more to lower barriers? But absolutely, I mean, we look at Portland and they've just adjusted their compensation. Obviously, we're not going to get to that level, but you're now seeing in the election cycles a much greater pool of candidates. And so, you know, I think we do want to engage our community and support people who might not otherwise be able to run. And I look forward to all of the conversations on all these different pieces. I'm supportive of bringing forward additional work sessions. So thank you.
Hey, thank you. I have Alan is up for a second round, but I just want to step in and take a moment in the queue as well. I first of all, I sort of agree with everyone that I wasn't looking for a big, I don't want to invest this city's resources in a major deep dive into a huge charter review process. I think we have a couple of things we could look at. And with all of you, I think a very sort of targeted, more surgical approach is appropriate. I also think I appreciate the conversation around, you know, what are the barriers to people running for office, and is compensation the way to address it, or are there other things? I mean, I think about the equity panel that we have used in various ways, equity panels on housing, on climate, and thinking, well, maybe this is a kind of an equity panel kind of question. But, you know, and the other piece is people always think that these are terrible jobs to be a city councilor. I mean, there's also that, and kind of how we sort of do the work and how that appears to the public. So I'm happy to see the city manager's hand up, because I think it's sort of complicated to figure out where we go from here. And I'll turn it over to Alan, but sort of thinking about what would be the next possible steps that would sort of help you as a council get a little bit closer to what are the problems you really want to solve, and what information and resources do you really need. And I just want to add that I totally agree on the timing here. We're having these very deep revenue conversations, and I don't think those things should be happening concurrently. I think we should be feeling like we have a little bit more of a plan on revenue before we actually talk about adding costs to the budget. But that said, so now I have lots of hands up. So Alan, Greg hasn't had a first round. So, and then the city manager, do you want to jump in first before okay.
No, I'll go after everybody else.
Okay. All right.
Thanks.
So Greg first, then Alan, then Matt.
Yeah, I just kind of want to echo what the mayor just said. You know, when I look at a charter review, I'm asking the big question is, what's broken and what do we need to fix? You know, clearly there's some equity issues there. There's challenges for people who are working full-time and whether or not they can have the flexibility in their work schedules to be able to serve and then, also receive a stipend for the work that they're doing. But I don't want to fall off the cliff like they've done up in Portland. And I give Portland as an example because the system of municipal government that they had, they realized was not working. Now they've gone to a whole different model than what they've had before. And so you go to big questions like, do you add more counselors? Do you shrink the number of counselors? What are the counselors' ultimate responsibilities? How does that interact with the city manager form of government? Does the city manager take a back seat to elected officials? There's a whole host of questions that are brought up in this conversation. And I don't think that we're ready to address those questions right now, particularly since we are facing some budget challenges that are going to be not only draconian and controversial, but we may have to go back to the voters again and, ask for a levy or some kind of revenue increase to continue to maintain the operations of the city or be willing to cut services. So there's some very deep questions that we're going to have to answer. And this, I don't think, is now the time to be talking about changing the rules of the sport.
Okay, thank you. Alan and then Matt.
I'm glad you think it's a sport, Greg. Sometimes it's challenging and sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. So I guess it kind of does fit the definition. I had two questions and I had a process suggestion. One was, City Attorney, any change we make to the charter, does that require a vote of the electorate?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Even minor stuff.
Correct.
So that leads me to my second question, which was general language review. What was that about? And so cleaning stuff up or changing language or even going where Randy was talking about, which is adding things to make clarity about what we actually do, actually has to go to a vote, correct?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
And what was the general language review? I don't know who put that up there.
Brooke, do you want to speak to that? Yes, Councilor Grove spoke to it a bit in terms of some of the sections have a higher level of detail than others, so that would be one lens. The other is in terms of equity, is the language that is currently used appropriate for where we're at today? And so there could be some element of cleanup there. The last charter review process, the way they accomplished some of those changes was through what they called the housekeeping resolution. And so it wasn't related as much to the content as just a whole bunch of minor things kind of bundled together. They had removed old sections that were no longer valid because things had changed in the laws. So that was the sort of housekeeping item that had passed previously.
Yeah, and in keeping with that, I'm curious what the problem is there that people are thinking about with specifics. So given that this is kind of our first take at this, and these are all sketches, I would suggest that we do is that we have staff work with the individual counselors that had these ideas to come up with very specifically define what the problem is and bring that back for a future work session for an up-down vote of whether or not we include that in the conversation moving forward. So I will make that as a motion. I suggest that the city manager work with the city councilors who have ideas about items for review of the charter to specifically define the problem, bring that back to council in a future work session for up-down vote for inclusion in conversation about potential potential amendments of the charter. And so that to me sets the agenda for discussion and moving forward. And if there's a second.
We have a second on that?
I'd like to hear from the manager before seconding. I don't mind voting, but I
Yeah.
want to hear from the manager first.
Okay. Yep, manager, you want to speak to that?
Well, no, I just want to be sort of in the queue because I realize like one of the items on the list is actually something I placed on the list, and since nobody else is going to speak to it, I will. But I don't need to do that if Councilor Zelenka's motion passes. I could do that as part of a future work session.
Right, the department head's residency requirement.
Yes.
Yeah. Up to you would talk with yourselves.
And yeah, and as I've been listening to you, I think specific answer to the language question, this is pretty common across the country right now. People have gone through and in some cases they're just dropping it into something like ChatGPT and correcting pronouns and just outdated language, very simple. And I think there was that plus the simplification piece. As I was listening to what is the problem we're trying to solve, what I've heard is already this list is based on a list of things that people feel like is broken. The compensation people feels broken. Like we could explore that, look and see what's happening around the state and see if there's, if we're still in line. And same with interim appointments, department head residency. A lot of these things I think do call for a little bit more evaluation, but I think we want to understand which ones you want to take forward. So
yeah, and my motion gets right at that, which is let's have staff come with ideas from the counselors, be more specific about what these are, what the problem is they're trying to solve, and then we can say yes, no, we want to have that conversation, and then we can move forward with the analysis and or other types of conversation about that particular idea in the near future. But let's kind of set the table of what we want to talk about. That's the essence of my motion.
Okay, we're still waiting for a second for that motion.
I'll second it.
Okay. All right. Matt, you've had your hand up for a long time, and I don't know if you want to speak to this motion or if it's something else.
Well, I was going to make a motion too, based on the feedback I heard, but mine was going to be somewhat. Mine was going to be laser focused on the compensation piece. But it sounds to me like Councilor Zelenka's recommendation would achieve the goals that I wanted to set out. And so without objection, Mayor, I wanted to just at least read my thoughts based on the conversation. And then if I could get an answer from either the manager and or Councilor Zelenka, if my thoughts match and mirror what Councilor Zelenka is attempting to do.
Yep, go
Thanks.
ahead.
I would have moved to direct the city manager to return to council with a work session that reviews council mayor compensation options and explores comparable municipal analyses around potentially adjusting mayor council compensation to be possibly implemented in 2027 pending voter approval. And the piece there, just for clarification, would be to give us time, recognizing the budget constraints in front of us. And half of us are in cycle right now, another half would be in cycle in 2026. So essentially all of us will be back, or none of us would be back, or a portion thereof when it would take effect in 2027. So does that line of thinking, Alan and Sarah, get to the heart of your recommendation?
Yes, in essence, that fits the mold about what we would want to talk about, but I would like to see all of it on the table at the same time, so we know what we're talking about, so that we can kind of pick through them and say yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, and move forward a conversation. So that's the essence of mine. Okay. And yours would be the specifics on that item.
Got it. So perhaps I can make that motion at that time. Sarah, do you have any feedback?
But that's what I was thinking, because what you're directing would be actually what would come after what I think Councilor Zelenka is proposing. Just we come back with a little bit more. Today was really supposed to just be an overview of the last process, and we wanted to introduce the items that you were interested in. We maybe jumped the gun a little bit, but that was what we were hoping to do, is like, where do you want to go with this? So I think the next one we can come back, and if there's other items, you know, we can have a little bit more depth into what we're hearing the problem is by talking with each of you. And then you can say, yes, go do the analysis and see what it is across the state, or not.
Right. And for each one of these, there's just not enough data.
Yeah, I'm supportive, Alan, of your motion, and I appreciate Mayor and colleagues the opportunity to explore my thoughts about kind of drilling down, and I'll make that more specific motion when we have that work session at that time.
Okay, that sounds like a good plan. So we have a motion on the table. It's been seconded. All in favor, please. Oh, Randy, you want to speak to it first? Go for it.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't have a problem with the motion. I just want to try and keep this as simple as possible. And it seemed like there were a lot of questions in the motion. And that's the only reason I'm even hesitating is again, I appreciate Councilor Zelenka trying to make sure we have as much clarity as possible, but it just seems like a lot of specificity to be asking rather than just staff reaching out. Can you explain yourself and what you're trying to accomplish? Thank you.
Mike.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm hesitant to bring this up, but it seems like the right thing to do. I noticed that in the previous iteration of charter review, there was a good deal more general public involvement than in what seems proposed here. I don't know the right prescription here, and I don't want to open up the process, as I already said before, to everybody in town who has an idea to, you know, try and explore some massive change. I think that's a bigger bite than we all want to take at this apple. So, but I do think that any process where we're recommending a public vote on the charter should involve some manner of public involvement at some step in the process. I'm going to leave it to the manager to recommend the best way to go with that. I'm sure she'll be happy with me for that, but I don't have a motion on it. I support Alan's motion, but with the thought process, hopefully, that the manager will have an appropriate level of public involvement as time goes on. Thank you.
Alan, and then city manager.
Yeah, my question was, is there any I think what staff did was they went out and talked to everybody, and this is the list that popped up. So I'm envisioning this is the list that we would want to clarify more. I don't know that there's I didn't have any other ideas to put on the list, but I wouldn't object if someone had another idea to have it be on the list. I guess staff could explore that a little bit more, because this stimulated more thoughts on the charter. But I definitely agree with what Mike said. I don't want this to be a big, huge, giant process. I think it should be a limited conversation about problems we're trying to fix. And these are the ones that rose to the top.
Thank you. Manager?
Thank you, Mayor. Since we have all been reviewing the charter, I know I get to actually participate in the conversations. One of the things I wanted to, so I wasn't going to mention the department heads piece because I was sort of assuming that this motion was going to go forward, but I do feel like I need to say it just in case. I added that to the list because it's a really archaic requirement. I don't think I've talked to the top 20 cities in Oregon. None of them require department heads to specifically live inside the city limits. And most of them have been dropping them because it has become a significant competitive disadvantage. I brought this forward initially when we were recruiting for a fire chief because I felt like it was a little bit unfair to require the fire chief of Eugene and Springfield to live in Eugene and not also Springfield. But since that time, I've done a lot of exploring and realized that we have significantly limited, especially our internal applicants, from moving forward and promoting because they are not going to give up their family homes. And we've had 2 cases where folks have at significant financial cost to them. And it's just something I think we need to talk about. The part about public involvement, I haven't heard anybody say that you want to have a exhaustive giant charter review like you've seen. If we come back with a little bit more information on the problem we're trying to solve on this list, and if there's another item we can, I think we could recommend, you could at that time say, okay, and here's how we want to involve the public. And it could be a public hearing, it could be a committee to review. And I think each one of those might have a slightly different answer, and we could put some thought into that before we come back.
Okay, that's very, very helpful. So, so we have Alan's motion on the table. It's been seconded. If there are no other comments, all in favor, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 opposed. 1. Okay. All right. Well, thank you. And Alan, I appreciate you putting forward.
Forgive me, who was the one, Mayor?
Who was the
Greg.
post?
Greg opposed. So yeah, I so appreciate the process. I really appreciate sort of the caution and care with which we're proceeding on this, to be thoughtful about how we use time and resources and make sure we're actually addressing problems and not digging deeper than we have to dig at this point for a system that's not badly broken, but has some fixes maybe. So thank you all very much for that. And with that, we are actually ready to adjourn a few minutes early. So we are adjourned. Thank you.